Hey,
Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Paul Bryans is with us today, and we're going to be talking about the photo show that he currently has at the Senior Community Center. I like to start these by thanking our sponsor, which is Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. They have a lovely location up on Rolling Bay, former site of the Messenger House. You should go out there and look at it because it is gorgeous. They have assisted living, independent living, and memory care all on that campus. And they also have a bar and grill, and they are offering people a free lunch if you want to come out and check it out. So to do that, either look on their website, fieldstonecommunities.com, or you can call them at 206-594-1010, or email Ashley C, ASHLEYC, at fieldstonecommunities.com. We are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, and we are grateful for their stewardship of these lands and waters since time immemorial. We honor them, and we are continuing to learn from them. And Paul, I always look forward to enjoying your slideshows, your presentations. And we were just talking before we started about how you have been generously distributing a book that you created that is available actually here at the Senior Center through the thrift store.
yes, only available there. Really, it was made a decade ago, and the bookstore finally stopped selling it. But I had a lot left over, so I donated them to the senior center. So they've marked it down really cheap, and it's a fundraiser for the senior center. So I urge people to see it. It won't have these pictures in it. It has, but it does have a sort of tour of Bainbridge Island. And one of the things I've heard people say they like to use it for is send it to friends and relatives that they want to have visit them here and say, well, look at what it's like here. You should come and see us.
So tell us a little bit about the show that is currently at the Senior Center, also on our website, that you're going to be walking through today.
Yeah, I've done, I think, three other exhibits there. And this one, I don't know, it popped into my head in the spring. I had another idea at first, and then I began to look at the things that I'd taken recently. And I decided, I go for a walk almost every day. And I have a photographer's eye. As I go along, I'm looking at the clouds, I'm looking at the ground, I'm looking at leaves, and I'm looking for things that would make good photographs. And I've learned that most people who aren't really into photography or art, when they see a picture, what they see is a picture of something. It's the subject that's important to them. Oh, well, that's and I see people posting pictures on Facebook by here's my beautiful girlfriend standing in front of the sunset. And the girlfriend's face is almost completely blacked out, and the sunset overwhelms everything. So that's one kind of thing. So a good photograph for that kind of person is something that's entertaining or heart tugging or whatever, and they don't care a bit about all the things that artistic photography is about, which I won't go into great detail of. But I thought, well, why don't I just keep it simple and do look for patterns that are coming up before my eyes and capturing those, and and encourage people to look at nature as art, to not just see, oh, there's a deer over there behind the bush, but uh, there's a nice combination of shapes and colors and shadow and light. So that's the basic theme here. Not everything adheres exactly to that. That was the basic idea.
Great. Yes. Maybe that's a form of mindful walking.
Yes, and I want to say right at the beginning here that the vast majority of these were taken with my iPhone 14 Pro, um, and two of them with a mirrorless camera, a Nikon Z50, which is very much superior in a lot of ways, but I think in this particular case, these are among the best pictures that the iPhone can turn out. And these prints are 11 by 17, good size, and they don't show a lot of haze or anything. So sometimes people are really surprised, but the photo club has more and more come around to realizing that you can take really good pictures with an iPhone.
Okay, let's dive in.
All right. Well, one of the most familiar sites on Bainbridge is blackberry vines, of course. Um, and I just spent part of the morning pulling up shoots in our yard because that's the last thing we want in the garden is blackberries. But we live very near Battle Point Park, and we can go over there and pick blackberries anytime we want if we want the fruit, which I enjoy. Like a lot of my pictures, is in Battle Point Park, and I'm there almost every day. What I liked about this was, first of all, that it captures green, yellow, red, orange leaves, all these different ones. There are a few berries in there if you look closely. And then it has the other plant life around the margins. They're doing things that framed it. Getting the two stems crossing each other gives it some real structure. And 3 is always a good number for taking pictures of things. Um, it makes me uneasy when I see 2 of something together most of the time, unless it's a couple. But if it's a plant, an odd number almost always looks more interesting than an even number.
We've got a couple of those. There are actually sort of 3 branches, and there are these sort of 3 sets of very interestingly colored and patterned leaf collections.
Right. And I just thought it was like this blackberry was going to show off everything it could do. The purple stems were particularly striking. And this is a red maple flower, which measured, I think, about an inch across. So I got up really close. The newer iPhones have very good macro lenses. Um, they actually double as the um, wide shot lenses. So you have to get really close, turn it on. And I did some editing here to bring out detail. Um, I'm a user of Luminar AI, which has a very nice detail extractor, and so it sees what the possibilities are and brings it out. I just had walked by this tree many times and never really looked closely at. They just looked like little red flowers that didn't have much to them. It wasn't until I got up really close that I said, "Oh my goodness, that's not a single blossom at all. It's a whole bunch of them." Very dramatic,
It
and
really is.
yeah.
It's amazing. So you were saying that you did you have to press a button on your iPhone to activate the macro lens?
No, it's a little irritating. What you do is just get up really close, and if it's working right, it pops up a little green symbol that tells you you're now in macro mode. But it doesn't always do that. Sometimes I have to try over and over to get it to work, but I got it to work. I actually took a photo like of this a day, and it didn't come out as sharp as I like. So I went back the next day and did it again. This one is just by the sign on the west side of the park where the parking lot is. And if you turn right there, there's one of the big park signs with announcements and stuff. And that this is just beside that.
Quick example of right in front of your face every day, but you don't see it if you don't slow down and look.
Right? And this is the least sharply focused one, but I love how it came out.
Well, this is like, ah.
Yes, this is one where the subject really gets you. Um, but it likes to also point out that if you follow the duck's body and the flow of her feathers and then down out her beak, then it continues in a curve through the ducklings. and the two ducklings at the bottom are faced away from you, so they close off that curve. So you got a nice spiral shape going here. The little daisy in there it popped up is just a little extra to add some interest. And of course, it's a heart tugger of a picture. The only drawback for me as a photographer is that my phone wanted to focus on the grass. So that's what's the sharpest in here. But I'd say most people wouldn't notice that.
Well, and the fuzziest are those ducklings
Yes,
who deserve to be fuzzy.
yes. So we have a ton of mallards over at the pond all the time, almost all year long, and there's a limit to the number of things you can do. But this one had gotten very tame, and believe it or not, I was standing immediately over him, just pointing out he was not going to budge. He was resting and just uh, tucking his bill in the feathers. It was kind of chilly day, so I think getting warm. Um, one of the things that's hardest to get with the mallards is their head feathers are so dark that usually the eye disappears. And one of the great goals of animal photographers is to get a glint in the eye. And this time it was, I used some editing to bring out by just lightening up that whole head area, just more brightening it. I didn't add anything to it. I just made it more visible than the phone initially picked up. And I had never noticed before the colored feathers on the main body underneath the wings there. And the fact that it picked up all those details just really, really grabbed me. Now, if you've been on the Sound to Olympics trail, you probably passed by this fallen tree and this big old root. It doesn't look much like this right now because it's very overgrown, actually with blackberries now, but and the puddle isn't there. I've taken several pictures of it, but this one with the puddle to reflect it and the ferns in the foreground, which is my favorite. And to me, it looks like a monster. The theme for this month in Photo Club was seeing faces or other familiar shapes in objects, especially in nature, that resemble something else. And to me, this looked like either a giant spider or some kind of some other kind of alien monster.
Exactly, a kraken from the deep or something.
Yeah. So, and then the reflection down below was really a nice addition.
Yeah, this fallen tree was one of the most delightful things to be uncovered in their work to try to put that STO trail between down at the ferry um, and High School Road.
Right.
It just emerged, and as you say, it's probably a constant effort to try to keep the invasives from moving back in. I see there's a lot of English ivy probably there, but it's uh, it's quite a what conversation piece, and I can imagine that in the winter you've got ice there, and now, as you say, not so much water, but interesting pattern.
Okay. Speaking of water, so one day I was walking by the duck pond in the park and I saw this feather floating on the water. And I said, I think I'll take a picture of that as close as I can get. I couldn't get terribly close. Um, but I was pleased with the way the details came out. And I thought, this would look even more interesting if I just selected the feather, then reversed the selection. So I selected the water and then softened it like crazy so that you can a lot of people look at this and they think that's currents of air or something floating, but it's actually just ripples in the water. So here the contrast between the feathery and the sharp detail and then the lack of detail and the smoothness is really what the picture's all about.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. This has been my biggest hit so far with the photo club of this series. And this was last winter. We had a few really frozen days where ice puddles were frozen. And this one was on the Arrowpoint Drive, not far from our house. And what I think what happened was the puddle surface froze and a car ran through it and crunched it all up. And then it refroze, but all these ice shards were frozen in place and made an abstract design. And my first thought was, well, I want to make this black and white, but I actually like the warmth of the various plant materials around it. And that brown frames it well. So you've got something in every single corner that holds the picture together and doesn't just dissolve into pure chaos. And this is my favorite of the whole bunch. Usually with my photographs, I adjust them so that the blacks in it are as solid black as they can be, and the brights are as bright as they can be without losing detail. But in this one, it's sort of a mid-range lighting. There was a bit of sunlight coming through in the lower left there, which I softened down a whole lot so it doesn't show up. But I just liked all the browns and golds um, that was just really appealing. I've looked and looked at tons of fallen leaves, and I've never seen anyone that appealed to me as much as this one. It had so many different colors represented from only two different kinds of leaves, big leaf maple in the middle, of course. And then the green ferns really help it to pop, I think.
Yeah, it's very, very nice. Oh, and I like this one too.
This one, I wish I could have had my polarizing filter on the camera with me so I could have reduced the reflection on the bottom half of this leaf. There's a large leaf onto which some small maple leaves had fallen and gotten plastered by the rain. And so I just, oh my gosh, I'd never seen anything like that before. And it was almost like some artist had put this together, but this is just what I found lying on the ground. All I did to it was to sharpen it up a bit and then tone down the brightness of the bottom half of the leaf.
Yeah,
So
it made me think of Andy Goldsworthy, who is a environmental artist who places things like this in the world and then lets them kind of decompose. But nature did this one all on its own, like you were saying, nature as art and artist.
I was just looking at my notes again and I misspoke about that feather picture. It was a Nikon picture. That's one of the two that I took with the Nikon, and this is the other one. All the rest are iPhone. So the Amanita mushroom is a stereotype. I mean, when somebody says mushroom, that's what you think of. White one, red top, little white dots all over it. Cartoonists love to use it all the time. Um, People love them. A lot of people don't know is they're highly poisonous. They're attractive, but you just really don't want to eat them. Um, and I thought, well, how can I take a picture of a mushroom that's not just a stereotype, but I've taken lots and lots of mushroom pictures. And so I did a few things when composing this. First of all, there was this branch, this twig coming down across it, and I left that there. It puts it firmly in place, front and back. Um, and then I saw that some of these little white flakes had fallen off and were caught on the grass, which is not something you usually see. So that added a little something to it. And having the grass blades going up and then the needles going down gives it some energy. And then I've deliberately placed the mushroom over at the 1/3 the zone, which is one of the basic rules of composing photographs is that often, most of the time, where you're 1/3 from the top or bottom and 1/3 from the left or right are the strongest points to put your subject, not dead in the center of the picture. This one, I was walking in Sakai Park, and I just looked down at my feet, and I said, "What am I looking at?" And I actually had to go online and ask some people. And the little orange things are Sakai or are cottonwood husks. When they first leaf out, they have these husks over them, and those pop up, and then the leaves come out. So they look like seeds, but they're not. They're if you look, you can see they're quite hollow, and they happen to be alder cones that had fallen off in the same area, and they just happen to get trapped by these sticks that were on the ground, and the rain washed them in there with a little bit of moss for extra decoration. And I thought, wow, what a amazing thing! I was just looking down at my feet, so I snapped it, and I really like it. And again, it's very contained because it narrows down to a point at bottom left, and it's almost like a funnel. It's funneling nature down and encapsulating it. The main thing I did here for altering it was the background was rather bright and not very pretty. So I darkened it way down, make it be more of a background
Looks
and
like,
draw
looks
attention to
muddy.
itself.
It
Yeah,
actually enhances sort of the sense of this as being very moist.
yeah,
And it has what you were saying a moment ago. It's mostly in the in the 1/3 of the photo, and it's definitely not in the center.
right. And probably everybody knows this sculpture. If you've been in the library garden with the otter and salmon. But I saw this and I laughed because I thought, oh, okay, is that salmon um, eating the leaves that are coming out of its mouth there? Or are those bubbles that are coming up because he's actually underwater? Could be either one. And the other leaves around it set it off. So this sculpture does not usually look like this. And I thought that was a very entertaining autumn touch for it.
Yes, and when you're talking about pattern and color, you've got the pattern of smoothness of the sculpture, and then a lot of busy activity, complicated patterns all around it.
Yeah, and there's also a rule that if you got somebody looking off with their face pointed in a certain direction, you should allow extra space for them to look into. So that's true here too. Well, this is the last one, and I was out on the Agate Passage beach at low tide taking pictures, and I just down at my feet and I said, "What the heck is that monster?" Um, and I didn't even recognize the shell at first. I had to use Google image search to remind me that's a crab shell. And it just happened to be two barnacles that just happened to locate themselves as a couple of eyes. And almost nobody guesses that this is just a natural phenomenon. It looks so deliberate. But it's one of those things, like a couple of these other pictures just made me laugh when I saw it. And the seaweed in the background really did a nice job of setting it off too.
Yeah, Paul, and then you've got a nose and you've got a smiling face at the bottom of
Yeah,
the crab shell. I
yeah,
mean, that's a whole thing there.
right.
You have
So,
some kelp in there too. I see the kelp in there. Yeah, they would.
so that's it.
That's what's for dinner, the kelp. That's great. Thank you very much, Paul.
You're very
Great.
welcome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
I've
And
already seen these up in the Arboretum and the atrium area, and it's just absolutely lovely. Thank you.
yeah, they'll be up through the end of the month, so come by and see them in person. As you say, they reproduced beautifully in of the large format print. The camera phone has come a long way.
Yes. I've been using a company called Nation Photography, and they do really nice prints, very high quality.
Great. And the photo club meets once, often twice a month. Is that right? Usually
The
there's a workshop.
workshops on the third Wednesday is, and the second Wednesday is the regular meeting.
And if you're interested and inspired, you don't have to have a lot of photographic experience to get started. People of all levels, and look at biphoto.org, I think, or is it biphotoclub.org? And you can find out what's happening next, because you guys keep a pretty good job of keeping it up to date with the latest information. Yeah, biphotoclub.org. So thanks again, Paul, and I'm enjoying the photos all month right here.
Thanks again.